Okay, so I decided that I did not want to look at an old transcript that I had done and published because I couldn't imagine thinking back about what I did and making that like for real, like making that true. So I asked Fred if it would be okay if I chose something new. And I will tell you that this is new. That means it's really the messy stuff of what I do when I'm working on stuff. And so I feel like I'm putting myself out there. It's a very vulnerable feeling, but I'm going to share it. So this is from a project that I have been working on for the past 5 years, and it's about learning in the food justice movement. And I worked on this project with a number of graduate students. Part of what I'm going to talk to you about is the way in which the process of transcribing, the practice of transcribing in my project is very collaborative. So a little bit about this background. The women who you can actually see in this film are promotoras, and they are people who work with a nonprofit food justice organization in Colorado. And their job is to work in the community, their neighborhood community, and help residents in the neighborhood develop different kinds of health practices and grow gardens, vegetable gardens, in their own backyards. It's a much longer project, but so these are promotoras. The women are the people who go out into the community. This is relevant for the clip. They go into the community and they're working with like now 300 people. Okay? The organization is run by two lead directors who don't go out into the community in the same way. They also do work in the community, but that's important for you to get. So we've been doing ethnographic research with this organization now for 5 years. This was our first year. This was part of a kind of a workshop that we did where it was the first time the promotoras had come together with the executive directors of the organization, and they've been sharing for probably 2 hours at this point what they wanted to see in the organization. And they had worked on a task, and this poster is a product of their work. And so they were imagining what they would like to do differently in the organization. Okay, so I think that's it. Okay, so I'm in the room, so is my colleagues are in the room. One of our graduate students was filming this, so I was not the person who filmed. I was drawn to this clip because what gets said was very critical of the executive directors. And I thought this was an important moment because the promotoras had not been expressing their critiques of the organization. They had not had a space for doing that. This workshop was a space for doing that, and what she says was quite important. So in terms of transcribing, I'm looking at my notes here, the language that's being spoken is Spanish. I've studied Spanish for many, many years. I have strong receptive Spanish skills. I don't speak Spanish well enough to carry on good conversations with this group. So that complicated my transcription process because I can hear some of the words. And when I started transcribing, I started by making that kind of rough transcript of what was being said. But I needed some help. So I turned to one of my colleagues who's English-Spanish bilingual research partner, and now she lives in Nashville. And I shared this clip with her by using Google Drive, which I think is an amazing collaborative tool. So I shared it with her by Google Drive. I shared with her what I had heard, and I asked her to listen to it as well. And I told her there's a bunch of segments I can't understand, like what's going on. So she looked at it a couple of times. She made her own rough transcript in Spanish, and both of our transcriptions included words that we could not hear clearly, which we marked as inaudible. Okay? I felt very uncomfortable. This is a 32-second clip, and I felt very uncomfortable using the word inaudible at all. And to use it multiple times felt like that's not right? So I became completely obsessed. I was telling Rogers that this is my usual practice. I became very obsessed, and I listened to this 32-second clip for hours over many days, right? And 32 seconds, and just blasting it in my headphones, trying to hear what was being said. So I will play the clip for you because I feel like it's time for you to hear it. And it would be interesting to hear. No? No loud? Okay, ready? So these are two promotoras. There's one who's going to be speaking.
A mí me gustaría mucho que Revision, o sea, yo sé que mi ingeniero, se involucraran más en las necesidades de la comunidad, que aprendieran a conocer más las necesidades, no nomás sobre el alimento, porque en la comunidad hay muchas necesidades respecto a la salud, respecto a la educación. A mí me gustaría que ellos, que conocen más y pueden lograr más, pudieran en un futuro, ¿no? Tener contacto.
That was actually it, but hold on one second. Let's play this last part again. This was the part of it that I couldn't hear. I know, why is it 5 minutes left? Okay, I think that's it. That's it, okay? So you probably, because I don't think everybody in the room speaks Spanish, need a transcript, correct? Yes, and anyhow, you probably didn't hear everything. So what I did just in my draft form was I transcribed the Spanish, and that's where I got the help. You can see it up there. I put the English next to it. That in itself is a big step. You know, translating is not just transcribing it. I had to actually change some of the words and the meaning changes. And so what I couldn't hear is, where is it? The very last section where it says 1 minute, 1 hour 33 minutes, 52. It says que pueden gran más pudieran en un futuro no muy lejano. I can understand no muy lejano. If you listen to it, it's very hard to hear that. Okay, and the reason I focused on it was because I believe in my analysis of what's going on in the scene that the group shifted. There was laughter in the room, and there was different kind of noise in the room after that was said. So it was important to me. And those are things that I feel like I always have to go back to and really dig deep into to understand what was that phrase. So how I figured out what that word was, I asked my partner to look at it. I asked a native Spanish speaker who is my graduate student right now. I asked her to listen to it. I asked an interpreter from the community who works with the nonprofit to listen to it. And everybody was really struggling to understand what it was. But I wish I could see where my video is. Sorry.
Command tab.
Here it is. You see the paper that's being held in the background. I did try to look at that paper very closely and pull out, like, she's reading parts of it. It's like a script for her. And I really tried to look in closely. I tried to change the lighting on the video to figure out if I could see any of the words the shape and sound of the word. Like, I searched on there. And I had the document in my office in Boulder. I live in Denver. I had to wait overnight to get back into my office. I pulled out my materials. I read through the whole thing, and I was searching for what could sound like that. And that's how I found the phrase that fit there. And I'm telling you this because I feel like it's really important to recognize the network of resources that I had to draw upon in order to make a transcript of this. I needed lots of people, and I needed the actual materials. Like, if I didn't collect the materials, I wouldn't have been able to figure out what was said, right? So that's really important to do, and for my finding out what it was. And once I did say it was no muy lejano, thank you, I checked with everybody, and then of course that was what everybody heard, right? They all heard it, they all agreed that that was what the phrase was, and it meant, you know, in the not too far distant future, she'd like to see change in this organization. And that's what got the reaction from the group. That included other promotoras and my research team. So that's one thing, and I'll wrap up by just saying that some of the other stuff that I needed to do in doing this work, I did want to look at the actions. There are an enormous amount of actions, and I didn't even capture all of them in the actions on the far right side of this page. But I think it's really important important when I'm first figuring out, like, what am I going to do with this material? I have to understand, like, what all could be happening. And I do, to Jürgen, your point, like, I do look at the video over and over and over, and it's not always what's in my transcript that becomes very important, nor are with elbows on table, if you look at 6, with elbows on table and hands at face level, opens hands and hits sides of her hands together. That doesn't mean much. That describes something at a very low inference level, but I do think that she's talking about community. She's talking at like action 7, she's rubbing her fingers together in order to talk about what can be learned and felt from action in the community. And she's making these points and like amplifying her points with her actions. I don't know if I'm gonna end up using any of this in my articles that I write about it, but I would not understand their significance if I didn't. I wouldn't understand the significance of her words, nor the like significance of like what she's asking people to do, I think, if I didn't have all that stuff in there. Does that make sense? I feel like it's the kind of really the thick description, it's helping me make the thick descriptions that I want to make. So I will end there, but I've got plenty more to talk about.
Can you share with us what notes you have for 14 and 15, please? Because we didn't
Yeah.
get that far down.
Sorry. So I barely touched this, but Barbara and I see, oh, do you want to?
So, to your last point there, what I've been trying to describe as description rather than transcription integrates those
Yes.
pieces.
Yeah.
So it would be something like, whatever her words are, as she rubs her fingers
Yes.
together, perhaps making the point of togetherness with her fingers.
Absolutely.
So rather than just what happens to the fingers,
Yeah.
it's an interpretation.
That's right.
Just like we're interpreting the words, we can interpret the action. As they're together, they make sense. Taking them apart makes it much harder to
Exactly.
interpret.
And when I write about this and why I even looked at it, I, like Chuck, this was juicy to me in the moment. It wasn't juicy because of this. This stripped away its juiciness. It's in my writing about it. Analytically, it's not my transcript about it, but it's my writing about what she's doing with her body and putting her hands over her face while she's speaking these very critical words. That's really important to the meaning of what's being said, but it's not in my transcript.
The tool that we came to use was description that's more like your thick description, with the evidence for the interpretation being right there in the description. We thought of it like writing like a playwright who was trying to get it in a position that somebody who's reading it could reenact what we are describing, which would require the actions and the words to be integrated together so that you could do something that would carry the same meaning that you're seeing in the videotape. So it's not, it sounds like, I don't know if I'm right, it sounds like you do the transcript stuff and then you write a thick description.
I don't. I do it the other way, and I wouldn't have done this if I had not been coming here, I'll be honest. Like, I would have probably stuck with what my more narrative, my writing. I would have stuck with my writing, and I probably wouldn't have done this, but I do use video in my work, and I need to know what I could possibly get from it. So I started messing around with it.
So are you finding there's some utility to the separation way of doing things? I think
I'm
it
not
would
sure
be for
yet.
some
That's what I'm trying to
purposes.
figure out.
I
I'm
think
not
it
sure
would be
yet.
for some purposes.
Yeah.
Okay.
One
I'm
more
not sure.
question or comment. Yep.
I really appreciate, Susan, both you and Jasmine, how you showed how complicated it is to try to build a transcript from video. My question is, how important you think it was that that the conversation was in Spanish?
Oh, so that I can tell ethnographically. We did 3 workshops like this over the course of a year. The first workshop was predominantly in English. The next 2 are all in Spanish. And
I mean for your work as a researcher.
yes, so that it was all conducted in Spanish. That was because the promotores had things to say, that they had the language to say it in Spanish. They didn't have it. They're not bilingual.
Yeah,
And
no,
so
I mean for you to try to understand the part that you couldn't understand.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Have you had that challenge when you're listening to English video? Because I certainly have.
I've had that challenge, yes. But I have been able to do it myself. That's usually what, I don't have to ask a whole bunch of people, and I didn't just ask any old Spanish speakers. I asked my partner who worked with me for 4 of those years, because she knew the people, she could understand what they're saying, she learned Spanish in the place where they're from. Other native Spanish speakers could not understand what she was saying at all, because they were like, she has an accent, and it's hard to make sense of. So I do think it complicated it. Make sense?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.